Gwen Zaley never believed in fate until the moment she and a stranger pushed the same revolving door at the exact same time and got stuck. "Whoa, sorry," the man said, laughing as the glass door wedged them awkwardly together. "Guess I'm not the only one running late." She looked up, startled, her hand still pressed against the door. He was holding a paper bag in one arm and a little boy's hand in the other. The kid looked up at her with big brown eyes and a gap-toothed grin. "It's okay," Gwen said, smiling. "We'll call it a draw." They gave the door another push together, this time in sync, and stepped into the lobby of the downtown building. The kid let go of his father's hand and darted toward the elevator button. "I'm sorry about that," the man said again. "I'm just trying to drop my son off upstairs before heading to work." "No harm done," Gwen replied, glancing at the little boy. "He yours?" "Yeah, that's Holden," he said, ruffling the boy's hair. "I'm Callum Zane." "Gwen," she said, offering her hand. She didn't give her last name. She never did when she wasn't in a boardroom. Callum's palm was warm and rough, like a man who worked with his hands. He wore jeans, a t-shirt, and a jacket that had clearly seen better days. There were bags under his eyes, but his smile was easy and genuine. "Nice to meet you, Gwen," he said, and for a second his eyes lingered on hers a little longer than they needed to. The elevator doors opened. "Come on, Holden," he said. "Preschool awaits." "Bye, lady," Holden called out, waving at her as the doors closed. Gwen stood there for a moment longer, her heart doing something it hadn't done in a long time. Flutter. She headed up to the top floor. As soon as the elevator opened, her assistant was already mid-sentence. "You have a call with the Singapore office in 15 minutes, and the board meeting got pushed to noon." Gwen nodded, stepping into the glass-walled corner office. The view of the city stretched out in every direction, but her mind was still on the man in the lobby, Callum Zane. She didn't know why he stuck with her. Maybe it was the way he looked at his son. Maybe it was the way he looked at her. She shook it off and focused on the day. Gwen was the CEO of Zalon Tech, one of the fastest-growing AI firms in the country. No one in the office knew her as anything other than the woman who built the company from a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire. She didn't have time for distractions. Especially not ones with messy hair, soft eyes, and a kid who said, "Bye, lady," like it was the most normal thing in the world. The second time she saw him, it was at the same revolving door. He was rushing again, holding Holden's hand and a coffee in the other. They both reached for the door at the same time, again. "You've got to be kidding me," Gwen said, laughing. Callum looked just as surprised. "What are the odds? Apparently higher than I thought," she said. Holden looked between them. "You're the door lady," he said excitedly. Gwen crouched down. "I guess I am, huh? Can I push the spinny door next time?" "You can push it anytime you want," she said. Callum raised a brow. "You bribing my kid with door privileges?" "Maybe," he laughed, and Gwen couldn't help but notice how tired he looked again. But he had that same grounded energy, like he was used to carrying the weight of the world and still managed to smile. They stepped aside as another person came through the door. "You work in the building?" Gwen asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, maintenance crew." "I do the morning shift, then work nights at the garage down on 6th. "That's a lot," she said. He shrugged. "Single dad life, you do what you have to." Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. "Well," he said, nudging Holden toward the elevator, "maybe we'll bump into each other again, door lady." She watched them go again. Back upstairs, Gwen locked herself in her office and stared at the skyline for a long time. She dated suits. Ivy League types. Men who knew how to talk and charm and lie. But this man, this struggling dad with 2 jobs, a kid, and no idea who she was, he made her feel something real. And she couldn't stop thinking about him. The third time wasn't a coincidence. Gwen left her office an hour early and waited in the lobby. Sure enough, Callum appeared, walking Holden out of the elevator. She stepped toward them. "Hey," she said, "you always leave around this time." He blinked, surprised. Yeah. Holden's preschool only runs half days. "Would you guys want to grab lunch with me?" He looked genuinely caught off guard. "Lunch? There's a little cafe down the block, nothing fancy." Holden tugged on his dad's sleeve. "Can we go?" Callum looked at Gwen. "Are you sure?" "I wouldn't offer if I wasn't." They walked together, Holden skipping ahead. The cafe was cozy and smelled like fresh bread. They got a table by the window, and Gwen ordered grilled cheese for Holden, a turkey sandwich for Callum, and a salad for herself. "So," Callum said, "what do you do?" Gwen hesitated. "I work in tech," he nodded. "That makes sense. You've got that whole smart, put-together look," she laughed. "Is that a compliment?" "I think so." They talked while Holden colored on his kids' menu. Gwen learned that Callum had lost his wife 3 years ago, that he'd been working nonstop ever since, that Holden was his entire world. She didn't tell him anything about her company, or her money, or the fact that she could have bought the entire cafe without blinking. She just listened. When they left, Holden reached up and took her hand without asking. Gwen's heart squeezed. Callum noticed. He didn't say anything, but he looked at her like he was trying to figure her out, and she let him. That night, Gwen sat in her penthouse and replayed the afternoon in her head. She hadn't smiled that much in years. She hadn't felt that light in even longer. She had no idea if anything would come of it. She just knew one thing: she couldn't wait to see him again. Gwen hadn't planned on seeing Callum again so soon, but the next morning brought a twist she didn't see coming. "Miss Zaley," her assistant said, stepping into the office with a barely concealed look of panic. "There's a leak in the server room, water damage. Apparently, someone from maintenance is already down there, but they need your approval to authorize outside contractors." Gwen stood immediately. "Show me." They descended to the second sublevel, a floor she rarely visited. The air was damp, the fluorescent lights flickering slightly. Cables snaked along the walls, blinking with quiet urgency. And in the middle of it all, crouched beside a panel with a flashlight in his mouth and a wrench in hand, was Callum. Her heels clicked against the concrete. He looked up, startled, then pulled the flashlight from his mouth. "You've got to be kidding me." "I could say the same," she replied, stopping beside him. "Didn't know you were part of our maintenance team." He wiped his hands on his pants and stood. "Didn't know you were higher than floor 30. I'm usually not." Callum looked at her differently now. Not with suspicion, but with curiosity that edged toward worry. "You're not just working in tech, are you?" "No," Gwen said, meeting his gaze. "I run it." He blinked. "You're the CEO?" "I am." He let out a breath, stepped back, and gave a small laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Well, that explains a lot. I didn't keep it from you because I was trying to lie," Gwen said quickly. "I just liked talking to someone who didn't already know everything about me." He crouched again, directing the flashlight under a pipe. "And now that I do, I'm hoping it doesn't change things." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he adjusted a valve, twisted something, and finally straightened up. "I've got a kid," he said. "That means I don't have time for games. Or for people who drop in and out when it suits them." "I'm not playing," Gwen said. His eyes searched hers, as if trying to find the cracks in her conviction. "Then why me?" "Because you're real. And I'm tired of being surrounded by people pretending not to be." He didn't answer, but he didn't walk away either when the contractor arrived. Gwen signed off on the emergency budget and gave instructions to fast-track the repairs. Callum stayed behind to guide the crew, not saying much more. But as she turned to leave, he called after her. "I'm off at 5, she paused. "If you're still interested," he added, brushing a hand through his hair. "There's a food truck near the park. Holden loves the grilled corn. I'll be there." That evening, Gwen swapped her usual heels for flats and tied her hair into a low ponytail. She didn't bring her driver. She didn't wear anything that cost more than a few $100s. She just walked, alone, to the park at the edge of the financial district. The food truck was exactly where she expected, beneath a cluster of string lights and a line of eager customers. She spotted Holden first, perched on a bench with a paper plate on his lap. Callum waved her over. "You're early." "Bad habit," she replied. He handed her a plate. "Try the corn, it's messy but worth it." She took it, and for a few minutes they ate without speaking, just watching Holden chase 2 other kids near the playground. "He's always that full of energy?" Gwen asked, wiping her fingers with a napkin. "From sunrise to past bedtime," Callum said, smiling faintly. "Some days I'm just trying to keep up." "Do you have help?" "My sister used to watch him after school, but she moved to Seattle last month. Now it's just me." Gwen hesitated. "Have you ever considered getting a nanny?" "I've considered a lot of things," he said, "but trust doesn't come easy, and I can't afford to make mistakes where he's concerned." A pause stretched between them. The breeze rustled the leaves above, and somewhere a dog barked. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "When I saw you in that office today, it threw me. I get that a lot. No, I mean, I thought I had you figured out. You didn't act like someone at the top. You were just kind and present. People like you don't usually notice people like me." Gwen looked at him. "Maybe that's the problem with people like me." He studied her for a long second. "So what happens now? I don't know. But I'd like to find out." Holden interrupted them by running straight into Gwen's legs, nearly knocking the plate from her hands. "Sorry," he said, grinning. "You're fast," she said, steadying herself. "I race the wind," he declared, then darted off again. Callum gave her a look. "He likes you. I like him too." They walked a little after that, down a quiet stretch of sidewalk, Holden skipping ahead. Callum pushed his hands into his jacket pockets. "I should warn you," he said. "I don't have much to offer. No fancy job, no big apartment. Just me and a kid and whatever I can scrape together at the end of the month." Gwen stopped walking. "I didn't ask for any of that," she said. "I asked for more lunches, more walks, more chances to get to know you." He looked at her like he wanted to believe it, like it scared him too. That night, when Gwen finally returned to her penthouse, she didn't sit by the window or check her portfolio. She didn't open her laptop or go over projections. She just pulled off her shoes, leaned against the kitchen counter, and let herself feel something she hadn't in a long time: hope. But she knew it wouldn't be that simple. Not when the truth had only just started to surface, and the world she belonged to could crush a man like Callum without warning, and it wasn't done testing them yet. "Do you always look like you walked out of a magazine ad?" Callum asked, eyes narrowing slightly as Gwen approached him near the produce stall. She glanced down at her oversized sweatshirt and leggings. "This is literally the most normal I've ever looked." He handed her a bruised apple. "You still manage to make everyone else look like an unpaid intern." "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should," he said, tossing the apple back into the bin. "This one's no good." They were at a Saturday morning farmer's market, tucked behind the city's botanical garden. Gwen had offered to tag along when Callum mentioned needing to pick up groceries before his late shift. Holden was with Callum's neighbor, a retired nurse who babysat on weekends in exchange for Gwen covering her dog's vet bills last month. She hadn't asked for anything in return, just saw the bill on the counter and paid it before Callum could say anything. He never brought it up again. They moved through the stalls slowly. Gwen handed over cash for a basket of strawberries before Callum could reach for his wallet. "That's the third thing you've paid for," he said as they walked toward a stall selling fresh herbs. "And it won't be the last," she said, brushing past him to inspect a bunch of basil. "I like paying for things. It's one of my lesser-known hobbies. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not." He watched her for a beat, then turned his attention to a row of bell peppers. "You're different when you're not downtown." She raised an eyebrow. "In what way?" "You take up less space," he said. "Not in a bad way, just like you're trying not to be noticed." She picked up a pepper and examined the stem. "Maybe I like being somewhere I don't have to be in charge. Or maybe you're afraid if people see the real you, they'll start expecting things." She looked up. "You analyzing me now? Only fair," he said. "You're the one who walked into my world." They paid for the last of the vegetables and carried the bags back toward the parking lot. Gwen offered to drive him home, and he didn't argue. His truck had broken down earlier that week, and he was waiting for a paycheck to cover the parts. In her car, sleek, silent, too smooth for the potholes they passed, he stared out the window, fingers drumming lightly on his thigh. "Do you ever miss being anonymous?" he asked. "I never was," she said. "Not really. Even before the company took off, my name came with expectations. Family. My father founded one of the top venture firms in the country. My mother was on the board of 3 international nonprofits. I wasn't allowed to fail." He turned to her. "But you did it on your own. Eventually, after they stopped speaking to me for ignoring their advice." He blinked. "You serious? They didn't want me starting something from scratch. They wanted me to step into their world, not build my own." He let that sink in. "That's heavy. I've carried heavier." They pulled up outside his building. Gwen turned off the engine but didn't move. "I could come up and help unpack," she offered. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You shouldn't keep pretending this is casual." "I never said it was." You're in a different orbit, Gwen. You don't just visit people like me unless you're slumming it or trying to prove something. She flinched. Is that what you think I'm doing? I don't know what to think. One day you're in heels and glass offices. The next you're buying basil and riding shotgun in your own car like you don't have a million other places to be. Everything about you makes me want to be here, she said quietly. The words landed between them like a dropped stone. He leaned back in his seat, exhaling. You said you like paying for things. Yeah, can you pay for time? She frowned. What do you mean? I'm trying to figure out if what's happening between us is real or just something that burns out the second it gets difficult. It's real, she said. But if you need time, I can wait. He opened the door. Come up, you can help me put the strawberries away. Upstairs, his apartment was small but tidy. A few of Holden's toys were scattered across the carpet, and a stack of unopened bills sat on the kitchen counter. Gwen didn't look at them. Callum unloaded the groceries. She rinsed the strawberries at the sink. You don't look uncomfortable, he said. I'm not. You're standing in a kitchen with a broken faucet and a stove that only works on one side. I've eaten in rooms where the wine cost more than the furniture, she said. None of them felt half as warm as this place. He leaned against the counter. You're dangerous, you know that? Why? Because you make me want things I stopped letting myself want. Gwen dried her hands. Then let yourself want them again. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Their eyes met and the space between them dissolved. But just as their lips were about to meet, the front door swung open. Holden burst in, cheeks red from the cold, dragging a paper bag almost as big as his torso. Look what Mrs. Lyle let me bring, he shouted, holding up a loaf of banana bread. Callum stepped back instantly. Gwen turned, smiling. That smells amazing, she said. Holden beamed. It's got chocolate chips. They spent the next hour eating thick slices of warm bread while Holden told them about feeding ducks at the pond and how one of them tried to steal his mitten. Gwen listened, genuinely invested, laughing when he imitated the duck's evil face. When it was time to leave, Callum walked her downstairs. I didn't plan for any of this, he said. Me either. I don't know if I can give you the kind of life you're used to. I don't want the life I had. I want the one I'm building, and maybe you're part of that. He hesitated, then leaned in and kissed her soft, unsure but real. When they pulled apart, he said, You should go before I do something stupid like ask you to stay. I'd say yes. That's what scares me. She didn't look back as she walked to her car. But her heart was louder than her footsteps, and for the first time in years, it was beating for something she couldn't control. Rain pattered lightly against the windows of Callum's apartment as Gwen stepped inside, holding a small box with both hands. She had called ahead to make sure Mrs. Lyle was watching Holden, and Callum had said nothing more than doors open. She took in the scene Callum standing in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, fixing the broken cabinet hinge with a screwdriver and a look of quiet concentration. A faint trace of coffee hung in the air. You always fix things on your only day off, she asked, setting the box gently on the table. Callum glanced over his shoulder, wiping his hands on a towel. Keeps me sane, and this door's been hanging off for weeks. Gwen stepped closer. Then I guess I brought this at the right time. She opened the box to reveal a set of tools, neatly organized in polished wood and stainless steel. His brows lifted. That looks expensive. Doesn't matter if it lasts forever. He touched one of the handles, then looked at her. You didn't have to. I wanted to. There was a pause, the kind that wasn't awkward but full of weight neither of them had figured out how to name yet. Callum leaned against the counter. My landlord finally came by, said he's raising rent next month. It's going to stretch things thinner than they already are. Gwen's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have to worry about that. I don't have a choice, she hesitated. You do if you let me help. He shook his head. I knew you'd say that. It's not a handout. It's me caring about you. He met her stare. What happens when I can't keep up with the life that comes with someone like you? Then I slow down, she said. I'm not asking you to change. I'm asking you to let me stand next to you. He looked at the floor, jaw clenched. I've spent years making sure no one could knock me off balance. Not even grief. Not even debt. And then you come in with your rooftop views and your quiet generosity and your way of looking at my kid like he's already yours, and I don't know how to protect myself from that. You don't have to, she said softly. He looked up. What if I mess this up? Then we fix it. Together, a breath passed between them, then another. Callum crossed the room and kissed her, not tentative like before, but with the kind of certainty that came after doubt. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers. I want you to meet my mother. Gwen blinked. You've never mentioned her. She moved to a care facility after my dad passed, early onset dementia. I visit every Sunday, but I've never brought anyone with me. She didn't hesitate. Tell me what time. That Sunday morning, they drove out of the city, Gwen behind the wheel. The facility was modest, tucked beyond a row of birch trees, the kind of place that felt like a home rather than a hospital. Callum's mother was in the garden, gently brushing her fingers along the tops of lavender bushes. Her hair was white, pulled into a braid, and her smile when she saw Callum could have lit up the whole lawn. He introduced Gwen carefully. This is someone special. The older woman studied Gwen for a long moment. You have kind eyes, she said, and Gwen nearly choked on the lump that rose in her throat. She spent the afternoon listening to stories about Callum's childhood, about the old house with the leaky roof, and the summer he broke his arm climbing a tree. His mother's memory drifted in and out, but her laughter was clear, her affection unmistakable. Later, as they walked back to the car, Gwen slipped her hand into his. I didn't realize how much of you I hadn't seen, she said. Callum looked at her, something unspoken in his eyes. I've never let anyone in this far. Well, she said lightly, you're stuck with me now. Back in the city, Gwen's world began to shift. She started delegating more at work, handing meetings to her VPs, pushing back investor calls. Her assistant started to raise an eyebrow, but said nothing when Gwen blocked off Friday afternoons without explanation. And then came the evening that changed everything. She found Callum waiting outside her building, Holden perched on his shoulders, both of them holding paper bags with grease spots at the bottom. Hope you're hungry, he said. We brought dinner. You brought street tacos, she said, amused. Into a building with a Michelin-starred restaurant on the top floor, Callum grinned. Yeah, but do they give you extra hot sauce and call your kid buddy? She ushered them inside, past the curious stairs in the marble lobby, into the private elevator, and up to the penthouse. Holden ran immediately to the window, pressing his face to the glass to watch the lights below. Gwen caught Callum looking around for the first time. I didn't realize it'd be like this, he said quietly. I told you I built it from scratch. He walked to the piano in the corner, touched the keys. You're not showing off, you're just letting me in, she nodded. They ate tacos on her spotless kitchen island, Holden swinging his legs and licking hot sauce off his fingers, while Gwen handed him napkins and Callum told stories about his coworkers at the garage. When Holden fell asleep on the couch, Gwen covered him with a throw blanket and Callum stood behind her, silent. He trusts you, he said. So do I, she turned. Then let me show you something. She led him to a room at the far end of the apartment, a room with high ceilings and nothing in it but a drafting table, a chalkboard wall, and a large window overlooking the river. This was supposed to be my next project, she said. A non-profit workspace for underserved tech students. He looked around. You haven't touched it. I didn't know what it needed until now. Callum stared at her. You want me to help build it. I want you to help run it. He blinked. You're serious. I've seen what you can do with limited tools, limited time, limited support. Imagine what you could do with all of that removed. He stepped closer. You're giving me more than a job. I'm giving you a beginning. His voice was thick. And what if I'm scared? Then we'll be scared together. Outside, the lights of the city blinked like stars come to earth. Inside, Callum kissed her again, this time with no hesitation, no fear, no barriers. Gwen wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, I love you. He looked at her like he'd been waiting to hear those words his entire life. I love you too, he said. Even before I knew who you were. They stood there, in the middle of a future neither of them had planned, and for once neither of them was trying to run from it. 1 month later, the nonprofit opened its doors with Callum as its director. Holden cut the ribbon with an oversized pair of scissors and shouted, I'm helping. While the crowd laughed and cheered, Gwen stood beside Callum, her hand in his, no longer hiding, no longer afraid, and when they walked through the front doors together this time, they pushed in perfect sync. The heavy doors of the ballroom swung open with a hush of velvet and a flurry of camera flashes. Gwen stepped inside, her arm looped through Callum's, every head turning toward them as the lights of the annual Zalon Foundation gala swept across the marble floor. She wore midnight blue silk, the hem of her gown trailing like starlight, and Callum stood beside her in a tailored black suit, one hand resting protectively on the small of her back. He leaned in as they paused at the top of the staircase. "Half these people are staring because they can't figure out who I am." "Correction," Gwen replied, her voice low and amused. "They're trying to figure out how someone this handsome hasn't been in their newsfeed before." "Flattery," he said. "Dangerous habit. You'll survive." They descended into the sea of elegance, crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and a string quartet tucked behind a curtain of orchids. Waitstaff moved like clockwork, offering canapés and chilled flutes of rose gold liquid. The room buzzed with high society murmurs and the rustle of designer fabrics. Callum had been uneasy when she first suggested attending the gala together, but now, with his hand steady and his gaze calm, Gwen knew he'd found his footing. He wasn't pretending to belong, he simply did. A board member approached, offering Gwen a warm smile and a folded program. "Your keynote is the last of the evening. You've got the crowd waiting for it." Gwen nodded, taking the card. "They'll have to wait a little longer. I'm not in a rush." After the woman moved on, Callum glanced at her. "You nervous?" She shook her head. "Not about the speech." "Then what?" "I've never introduced someone as part of my life before, not like this, not in a room full of people who think they know who I am." He looked at her for a long moment. "Then let's make sure they find out who I really am too." They moved through the room together, Gwen introducing Callum by name to every investor, every donor, every executive who blinked one too many times at the absence of a title after his. She didn't explain his background or make excuses. She simply let him be himself, observant, grounded, and quietly compelling. The way he engaged with people, asking questions they didn't expect, listening rather than performing, it disarmed them. When the music dimmed and the MC called Gwen to the stage, she kissed Callum's cheek and ascended the steps. The crowd hushed. She stood behind the podium, the light catching the soft shimmer of her dress. She let the silence stretch for a beat, her eyes sweeping across the room before settling on Callum, who stood near the back wall, hands in his pockets, watching her like she was the only person in the room. "I built Zalon with nothing but an idea," she began, her voice clear. "I had no connections, no investors, and no roadmap, just a stubborn belief that technology could serve more than profit, that it could change lives." The audience leaned in. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot that change starts with people, not platforms. It wasn't until I stepped outside of the boardrooms and into the world people live in every day that I really understood what I'd built and what I hadn't." She paused. "I met someone recently, someone who doesn't have a title or a trust fund. Someone who reminded me that doing something well isn't the same as doing something right. And because of him, Zalon is launching an initiative to provide fully funded apprenticeships for under-resourced adults looking to break into tech. We're not just creating opportunity, we're creating access." There was a moment of stunned silence, then applause. Real, genuine, rising like a wave, Gwen stepped down from the stage and made her way through the crowd. Callum was waiting exactly where she'd left him. "That was bold," he said. "It was overdue." He took her hand. "You just changed the trajectory of a lot of lives." She brushed her fingers along his collar, "starting with mine." Later that night, back in the apartment, Holden was asleep in bed, his dinosaur nightlight casting gentle shadows on the wall. Gwen and Callum stood on the balcony as the city whispered below them. "I've been thinking," Callum said, his voice quiet over the hum of traffic, "about what we're building." She turned toward him. "I've been offered a spot on the advisory board for the program," he said. "Not just running the center, helping shape policy, curriculum, outreach. I want to say yes." "You should," she said. "I'm proud of you." He took a breath. "And I want to make something else official." She tilted her head. "What's that?" "I want you and Holden to be my family. I want to come home to you every night, not as someone visiting your world, but because we've made one of our own." Gwen's chest ached in the best way as he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Inside was a ring simple, elegant, a solitaire diamond held in a brushed platinum band. "Will you marry me?" There was no hesitation. "Yes," she whispered, her voice catching. "You sure?" he asked, brushing his thumb along her cheek. "I've never been more sure of anything." He slid the ring onto her finger, and she kissed him long, slow, and full of every answer she didn't have the words for. They married 6 weeks later in a quiet ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. Holden wore a tiny suit and ran down the aisle ahead of Gwen, dropping paper airplanes instead of flower petals. Gwen walked toward Callum with no veil, no pretense, just a smile that reached all the way to her soul. After the vows, they danced under a canopy of fairy lights while their closest friends and a few curious ducks watched from the pond's edge. In the months that followed, the nonprofit thrived. Gwen continued to lead Zalon with a reimagined vision, while Callum expanded the program into 3 more cities. They spent weekends at farmers' markets, weeknights building pillow forts with Holden, and quiet mornings reading side by side in the sunroom they'd added to the apartment. One night, as they tucked Holden into bed, he looked up and asked, "Are you going to be my mom forever now?" Gwen knelt beside him, brushing his hair from his forehead. "Forever and ever." Callum stood behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder, his eyes soft with everything words couldn't hold. And for the first time in a life built on ambition and blueprints, Gwen Zaley finally had everything she never knew she needed: love without conditions, a family without pretense, and a future not defined by what she built but who she built it with.